These are reflections that's being spoken right now about the George Floyd case and police brutality. I only caught part of this. I wish I'd have gotten it all, but please listen and listen to some of the statistics that this individual knows that obviously he has studied for quite some times.
Else in the United States. New Jersey has the best use of force policies in the United States. Over 350 cities since last June have restricted the power of the police to use force. About 15 states have also done that. So that stuff is big. But when we think about one of the biggest leverage, Chuck, is actually police unions. You know, we lead the country's work around police unions, and police unions have an incredible amount of power. There are places where the police, they can't be interviewed within 48 hours. In Portland and in Seattle, the contract says that the officer has to be disciplined in the least embarrassing manner. You're like, I don't even know what that means. There are a lot of places where police disciplinary records get destroyed after 2, 3, 4 years. You know, it's like the police have really rigged this, and there are 20 states that have state-level officer bill of rights that protect the police. That's actually what made the Maryland bill so incredible. Maryland was the first state to have an officer bill of rights and was actually the first state to repeal it.
You know, it's interesting you bring up police unions, because I guess the question is, how much of this reform do you believe has to be on the state and local level? Or are you playing whack-a-mole on the state and local level and nothing happens unless you create a higher floor on the federal level? So I guess, because look, you hear the news that the Justice Department's investigating Minneapolis. And if my first question was, well, what about Brooklyn Center, which is next door? You know, where do you view as where it's needed most? You got to work on the state level because of all these specific laws, or do you think a federal reform package can do the trick?
Do you know what's the highest number of investigations the DOJ has ever done in a given year? Like, what's your guess? There are 18,000 police departments. What's your guess?
Yeah, I'm going to guess less than 5.
3, yes, you're right. Yeah, so, you know, we like the DOJ intervention. It has changed a lot of places, but when you think about 3 out of 18,000, you're like, that's not a...
Right.
It's not necessarily a big win, and normally it goes where the media goes. It doesn't necessarily go where the problem's most acute. So you think about places like Phoenix, and Phoenix, 1 in 3 homicides a couple years ago was committed by a police officer, right? Like Albuquerque, you know, it's places like that where the DOJ should actually be intervening, right? Phoenix and Albuquerque.
But our cameras haven't been there. What you're saying is our cameras aren't there, right?
Your cameras aren't there. And, you know, the police actually kill more people in suburban communities than almost all other communities combined. It's not even close. So you look at when we graph it, it's like suburbs are here. Cities are here. Cities are actually like the only place that it's getting better. So Brooklyn Center is much more representative of the problem. Ferguson is the suburbs. Kenosha, where Jacob Blake got shot, is the suburbs, right? So I say all that to say the federal government can do some interesting things, but the real juice is at the local and state level. And what Biden could do tomorrow, and the George Floyd Act, remember, doesn't reign in the federal government. He tomorrow could reign in Border Patrol. That's 20,000 officers. ICE, the ATF, the DEA, he has the absolute power to do that without Congress, without a commission, without a task force. He could do that right now.
But you bring up the point I was trying to bring up with Chief Acevedo, and that's because I know the area well. I grew up there. Miami-Dade County has dozens of police forces, right? I promise you, Metro and the city of Miami have a lot of eyes on it. I don't know how many eyes are on Miami Gardens. I don't know how many eyes are on South Miami. And those are just 2 police departments I'm singling out. And I'm not saying there's a specific reason, but that's my point. This suburban police department issue, are there too many of them? Should they all be collapsed?
So definitely too many, but also like people just aren't paying attention. You know, people talk about training and people talk about body cameras. And the research is clear. Training might change police officer attitudes, doesn't change their behaviors. Body cameras might change police officer attitudes, doesn't change their behaviors. Chuck, imagine if you had a job where you could do whatever you wanted, and the worst thing you did, the consequence would be going to a training. You do whatever you wanted. Even with convictions, the highest number of convictions ever. You know, police kill on average 1,100 people a year. The highest number of convictions ever is 11 in a given year.
All right.
Ever.
11 out of 1,100. Ever. So what happened yesterday with George Floyd is an exception to the rule. But the question is this: should that be an exception to the rule? Because I can verifiably speak of police officers who have been lax towards not gaining the proper evidence that they should have gained during the time of the scuffle or during the time of the commotion. I can speak verifiably that some officers, like an officer or two, maybe even three, including the captain up in LBL, was aggressive in the way that they handled me, simply because they was creating a profile about me up there by trying to make up lies, by saying that I was going to blow up the Kentucky Dam, or by saying that I was doing this or saying that I was doing that. These people are people too. And if you think that the system is perfect, if you think that the police departments, that everybody in there is Mr. Goody-Goody Two-Shoes towards following the letterhead right down to the book, you got another thing coming. Because it's not that way in reality. There's a few of them out there that follow the letterhead. There's a few of them out there that want to be friendly. There's a few of them out there that don't get aggressive. But by and large, a great deal of them do. Like the man just said, 1,100 people die from firearms coming from some sort of law enforcement police officer. But on average, only 10 or 11 or 12 you see any convictions on. So whenever you have this much, I'm going to call it unstableness in our society, whenever you have this much unfairness in weighing it out and it not being equal, that's when you have protests that we've seen where people have just went absolutely start raging crazy, as far as I'm concerned, in which, don't get me wrong, I support protest. I support people speaking out against police brutality. I speak in unison of being an advocate for these things, because I know for a fact of different police officers that has lied about my profile, and they have spread malicious gossip through one church versus another church to the point that I myself around here in this particular area have been banned or grounded from the majority of the churches in this area. Just like yesterday, after UTM here in Martin, Tennessee, recently just got through having a rodeo that belongs to UTM. UTM performs this, okay? Thing about this little town, UTM owns about 2/3 of everything that goes on major in Weakley County, Tennessee. So in order for me to go to an event, it doesn't matter if it's a basketball game, football game, a concert, or a rodeo, I can't go in my own home county, in my own home state, simply because of a college up here that refuses to call me back and have some sort of a appeal trial about how that they have banded me from UTM based upon me passing out 2 or 3 CDs whenever I was working directly with one of their, I guess it's a television monitoring station of one of their people that was willing to help me make up some of the DVDs. That was whenever I basically first got back here in 2015. So now it's been 5 or 6 years since the ban has come in effect. I'm now 60 years old, and I still can't go to a ball game. I still can't go to a rodeo, and I still can't get that telephone to answer pertaining to somebody involved with law enforcement up here locally with the UTM. Now, you tell me that ain't bias. That is just as bias can be. So what am I supposed to do? Miss out on some of the good times? You wonder how come I prayed the prayer that I prayed up in LBL? That's why. Because I felt like that the system was so unbalanced, so unfair, that the only thing that was going to straighten this thing out was to use reverse psychology and let God straighten it out. Bring the wrath of God down upon to we the people, and let we the people figure out, well, why is the wrath of God hitting for? Is it just because this individual prayed up in LBL for the wrath of God to fall? No. No, because I promise you there's been thousands and thousands and thousands of others that has prayed the same prayer. God, please do not let them run over me. Please do not let them tarnish my son's reputation. Please do not let them destroy my daughter's this or my daughter's that. There's been thousands of prayers that has went up into the heavenly kingdom of the same sort. Of the same sort. My case began back in 1983, in which, if you know anything about me, you know my case, in a little town called Kenton, Tennessee, of a mayor and a dirty police officer by the name of Don Curry that decided that they was going to let a villain loose pertaining to my biological father, who they should have charged for criminal intent and the intent to commit murder. But rather than them doing that, they patted him on the back and told him what kind of good job that he done, and then scarred me by sending me to a mental institution. That was the beginning phases towards trying to tarnish, ruin, destroy the calling that God had placed up into my life, going all the way back to 1983, whenever two hands miraculously come out of heaven that saved my life. I know for a fact that these occurrences happened. I got proof of proving these occurrences. In every incident, I say every incident, most every incident, whenever the law has been called out here at 291 Thompson Road, since I've come back from being in the field since 2014, going from state to state, from West Coast to the East Coast, 3 different times, all on my dime. I have kept up with the incident reports where David and I begged for something to be done pertaining to the atmosphere that was being created by all these heathens out here, begged the court system in this county to help us. Hired attorneys, went to court, and was basically laughed at by Tommy Moore. And the pressure and the tension and the disrespect was so intense, I know for a fact it had something to do with my brother's death. Especially whenever they was riding around here simultaneously, sometimes 7, 8, 10 times a day, hollering, screaming, false accusations. Our property got vandalized several different times. Hate mongering. And the judges in this county allowed for the hate mongering to go on because they themselves didn't want the Jackson family to prosper or to succeed. Because of biased judgments coming from various judges and prosecuting attorneys in this county is the very thing that put a felony on my life. Simply because of my brother and I that was concerned about 3 little children across the street that we knowed was being abused and was in an environment that they had no business in being in. Over drugs. Over drugs coming from the parents, or being assisted by the parents. I've never seen so many things that has been outlandish. I've never seen so many things that has been out of focus. I've never seen a country. Of course, I've never lived in any other country to go by, but I've never seen a country that was this tarnished and diminished by its own procedures and policies as I have the United States government. We've got a higher report of not just police brutality, but we've got a higher report of a police arrest and people going to prison in this country than any other country in the world. Now, what has happened to us? You may ask, what has happened to America? What happened to America towards them standing up for the morals and being that in which what our present ancestors was after World War II? What happened to America? I'm going to tell you what happened to America. America started slipping. And America started sliding backwards. And the next thing you know, they let this in. They let that in. They let this in. They let that in. To the degree that America basically has become contaminated. To the point that it was like a brainwashing or a spellbinding event that has become a normalcy in America. And now, I guess we've all kind of drinking the poison to the degree that now we're all contaminated, or most all of us is contaminated. This contamination can be from not being truthful, from being hateful. This contamination can be from a person, an individual that is selfish. This contamination can be somebody either on alcohol or drugs. This contamination can be somebody that don't have true love in their heart. This contamination can be somebody that's obsessed with porn. This contamination can be from A to Z, either direction, as it speaks of in the first 3 chapters of Revelations. For I've not found thy works perfect yet, to go back and to do thy first works. For he who is lukewarm, I will spew thee out of thy mouth. There's a reason why God says that he will spew thee out of thy mouth if you're lukewarm. And the reason why is because he wanted us to become perfected to begin with. That's the whole sole purpose for going to God and accepting the Holy Spirit. That's the whole sole purpose in being able to spare our own souls, that once we die, rather than hear God say, depart from me, for I've never known thee, but we're going to hear him say, well done, thy good and faithful servant, for you've been faithful over a few things. Come, enter into the joy of the Lord, for I will make thee ruler over many. God and the Holy Spirit is the only thing that is preventing from total chaos from busting loose up onto this planet. And the closer that people become radical, the more radical that Mother Nature becomes. And I've said this many times, and I'll say it again. It's as if it is a reflection of a mirror that's being monitored by the heavens above us, that's looking down onto us. And the more contaminated or the more radical that the people become, the more radical that Mother Nature becomes. In other words, instead of just having a shower, now we have a flood. Instead of it drying up, now we go through a temporary disaster pertaining to a drought. We go from one extreme to another right now with our weather patterns like I've never seen. Today's the latter part of April, April 21st, and they're calling for frost warnings in this particular area that I haven't never seen. I ain't never seen it frost in late April. I guess maybe some of the older timers can say that they've seen it frost in this time of year. But there's too many things happening with our environment that is unexplainable other than saying it's being done on a supernatural form. I myself have become contaminated with various sins that I got to look at myself and monitor myself on a day-to-day level and say, God, please forgive me. Give me the strength that I need to be able to overcome that. Don't allow for me to say stuff like that again. Don't allow for me to think stuff like that again. Don't allow for me to perform like that again. God, please, please, I beg of thee. For Christ said that the spirit be willing, but the flesh be weak. This is all a state of perfection that we're supposed to be becoming closer to God instead of further away from God. And of course, the drugs have helped to contaminate this great country, as well as everything else towards demoralizing a society. And that's exactly what has happened here. We have been demoralized. It has been weaponized against us, because we're dealing with things today that even our ancestors back in the early 1900s didn't have to deal with, pertaining to all these different chemicals and all these different drugs. And then if you go back 100 years before that, and 100 years before that, and 100 years before that, well, they didn't have TV, they didn't have running water, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have electricity, they didn't have cars. They was down to the bare bones towards how that they was living and how that they was surviving. There was good people back then that still could not overcome their sinful fleshful ways pertaining to greed and selfishness and hate, that probably has been denied the entrance of heaven based upon their performances. Today, we have so many different influences that is coming at us that we're being bombarded and attacked by. We are under siege from the spirit world, just as the Bible talks about that in the last days that these evil demonic spirits will rise up in great wrath because they know that their time is short. Please do not take these things lightly that are going on around us and with us, because they're only going to escalate and get worse and worse and worse until we as a society decide that we're going to turn from our sinful and wicked ways and allow God to heal us. Heal us from the inside out, not the outside in. Allow for the Holy Spirit to work within us so that we can become that in which what God desires for us to be, towards us being perfect in the way that God desires for us to be. You know, one person's mind of perfectness may be completely, totally different than another person's mind. That's kind of like righteousness. Well, how do you declare a person is righteous? Well, I guess it's based upon sincerity of the relationship that they have with God. Job was accounted as being a righteous man. Other prophets of God was accounted as being righteous. Mary, Virgin Mary, was accounted as being a righteous woman. Now, in our eyes, if we was living beside Mary, we may have thought that she was just like any other young female at that time. Or if we was living in the era of Job, what we could see of Job didn't look no different than most anybody else. But in God's eyes, because God looks at the heart, God looks at the inside of the soul, not just the outside, but in God's eyes, He's seen something in Mary. He's seen something in Job. He's seen something in other prophets of God that He didn't see in other people. And because of that, it is verifiable that God the Father knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows us even as he knows the hairs on our head, according to the Bible. So as you listen to these reports coming out pertaining to the George Floyd, I'm going to use the word vindication. Vindication. George Floyd has been vindicated pertaining to how that this police officer attacked him and killed him out on the streets by holding his knee on his neck for 9 minutes and some odd few seconds. These are all the disturbing factors that not only the general public should be looking at, but these are all the general factors that the professional world, especially the church world, should be looking at pertaining to how the methods and the tactics that these police officers use on a day-to-day level. And I know for a fact of what this individual just got through talking about pertaining to Phoenix and Albuquerque, New Mexico, being some of the two worst places to live in pertaining to this type of police brutality. Some people say it's because of drugs. Some people say it's because of the illegal immigrants that has crossed the border. Maybe it's a little of both. I don't know. But the bottom line is this. What is motivating these people towards going in that direction? It's because of a failed system. It's because of a failed church. And whenever I say a failed church, I'm just not talking about the Baptists, the Methodists, the Church of Christ, the Catholics, the Jehovah's Witness. I'm talking about blanketing the whole masses that the church itself has been broken, that it's no longer being effective like it was shortly after World War II. That brought in a great deal of creativity and a great deal of righteous human beings. There was still bad human beings back there. There was still people that committed heinous crimes back then. But nothing on the level like it's happening now here in America. People need to straighten up. They need to wake up, and they need to smell some of this stuff that people's been walking in and listening to people such as myself that has been giving out warning after warning after warning, advisory after advisory after advisory. And if you don't listen, if you want to plug your ears to the point that you don't want to listen to people like me, crime is going to exceed, violence is going to exceed on levels coming to a neighborhood near you, just like the Walmart slogan. And once it reaches a certain level, that's when fire and brimstone will fall out of the sky and God will bring great retribution. He will throw us off into great tribulation. You may think that we're in a form of tribulation right now, and to some degree we actually are, depending upon the circumstances and where you're at. In a certain degree, we are in a form of tribulation. But it's not the great tribulation that the Bible talks about whenever he shall come back and rain fire and brimstone and burn everything down to the ground, regardless whether it be commercial or residential. Anything that can burn will burn. And the smoke will rise up into the atmosphere, and the sun will be darkened. If you think it's bad now, just hang around a few more days, a few more weeks, a few more months. If we don't change our ways, hang around, because it's coming near a neighborhood near you. That's how close we are to doomsday. They keep moving that hand up a little closer and a little closer. The last time I seen, it was about 90 seconds that was left on the clock, a minute and a half to doomsday. That was the last that I looked. If the truth be known, we're probably right there at it. And whenever I say doomsday, I'm not necessarily talking about mankind destroying mankind by a nuclear holocaust. I'm talking about the wrath of God falling upon this great world, upon this great planet, because it ain't just going to fall upon one part of the world. It's going to fall upon all the world, and that's when God will return. He will gather together his elect, regardless whether it's 440 or 4,000 or 144,000. He will gather together his elect from the four corners of the earth, and he will plunge this planet off into an area that has never, ever been recorded according to the history of mankind. It will be plunged into darkness and into madness like you could not even begin to fathom or imagine. That's what we're at the brink of seeing. If we don't see a mighty movement from God as far as a great revival, we're at the point of seeing great retribution. We're already seeing Mother Nature cry out in different ways, in different forms that the Bible talks about towards it being God's great sorrows that will fall upon humanity in the last days. A sorrow is something that God himself is brokenhearted about. It's things that God himself are in distress about. That's what brings the sorrows up onto the earth. And the reason why the sorrows fall up onto the earth is because God's trying to lead us out of the bad pasture up onto the good pasture, because there's been too many people that has went astray. Today, as you're listening to this police report, there's no doubt that these people need to be reformed. These people have lied about me. They have brought all kinds of false accusations against me. And it wasn't just the police that was involved in this, but it was the media that supports bad management. One embraces the other to the point that, just like this individual talked about, the system is rigged. The system is totally rigged. Let's back up and listen to this report one more time, because I feel like it deems necessary in listening to the tone of the statistics of this individual that has already obviously studied this. Studied it hard to be able to blast out this type of information this quickly. And like I said earlier, I wish that I had gotten all of it. And maybe there's a way that you can go online and get this particular interview. I'm sure it is through the MSNBC.
Decisions that
you can actually get the whole interview pertaining to this individual that's talking right now, providing that you even want to. But I wish that I would have gotten the whole thing, because if he's engulfing in this type of information, factual information, halfway or into his interview with this commentator, God only knows what he said before all of this that helps to verify police brutality, that helps to verify the need for police reform. I understand. Don't get me wrong. I understand that a lot of good cops have to use bad tactics to help maintain law and order. I'm not stupid. We understand that in certain situations with certain people, things get out of hand. We're not stupid. We understand the bad guy, good guy scenario. But for these occurrences to be happening on the level that they're happening, 1,100 people get slain by police officers every year, but there's only 10 or 11 or 12 people that hold them accountable for what that they have done. See, that's the whole primary purpose for me putting out the information that I'm putting out. Not just against the Weakley County authorities, not just against the Obion County authorities, but also against the Kentucky authorities, against the Oklahoma authorities, and to some degree, even the GBI authorities, and the federal FBI and ATF authorities, in what that they done to the Davidians down in Mount Carmel in Waco, Texas, and also by lying to the general public that there had to be more than a Ryder truck and 3,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate that killed 168 people as recently as about 4 or 5 days ago, coming up onto their 26-year anniversary. If you're going to be professional, you need to act professional, because in this day and time, with as many cameras that are out there, it's just a matter of time before we're going to be exposed to this again and again and again and again and again. And I hate to say that video cameras on telephones was engineered and developed by the Holy Spirit pertaining to God Almighty. But if this is the only way that we can make any sense out of all this, is to video these people in their bad behavior, that most of the time never gets exposed to the general public. Never gets exposed. If this is the only way that we can straighten up these bad policies, then so be it. Let the cameras roll. Let the recording devices continue to record bad, harsh events that some of them may have been justifiable, but it sounds to me like a great deal of them was unjustifiable. And whenever I say that, I'm reflecting back upon to myself of what went on with Secret Service, what has went on with Kentucky authorities on a state level as well as a federal level, and what has went on with the Tennessee authorities, and what has went on with the Oklahoma authorities primarily. In my personal life, I know for a fact how they lie, how they cheat, how they'll cut your tires, how they'll make up things on you. I guarantee you, if I would have remained out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, or anywhere in Oklahoma, after 2013, whenever I come back to Collision Clinic there in Oklahoma, if I would have remained there, they would have either planted some sort of drugs or explosives on me to make me go to jail the rest of my life, or they would have just come out and assassinated me, or at least tried. I was in that type of environment because I exposed the truth towards a government cover-up of a group of people that should have told the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, supposedly, so help me God. Now, I don't know who their God is. Their God may be the lying God, the God of Satan, the God of evil, the God of unrighteousness. And apparently that's what they're swearing oath to by being able to lie to the general public like they lied about the Oklahoma bombing. That even to this day, I'm still being punished for. Even to this day, I'm still being looked down upon. Even to this day, it's still having a profound effect upon my particular life. Just like other individuals out there that has been captured or caught or entrapped by being in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong individual. And the next thing you know, they wind up with a criminal rap sheet as long as your arm. Not as long as your leg, but as long as your arm. Because of the circumstances. The politicians has failed the American people. Going back, I guess, all the way back to the Reagan era of whenever we was concentrating on spending $6 trillion on a war that we probably never should have even engaged up into. Especially if we thought that we was justifying the war of the people that actually masterminded 9/11. We have gotten our priorities totally wrong. Our jobs has left us. They've all gone south. We got ahead of the cart got ahead of the horse. And now the only thing that people can resort to is illegal activity towards being confiscated on the barrelhead, cash under the table. And it's not supposed to work that way towards survival here in the USA. It's not supposed to work the way that this individual's fixing to talk about towards 1,100 deaths a year that is being performed and manifested by police officers that, if the truth be known, never hits the media. Why don't it hit the media? Because the media themselves has created this monster. Whenever Donald Trump talked about the system being rigged, and when Donald Trump talked about the system, the swamp needing to be drained, he nailed that right on the head, pertaining to the environment, the bad environment that has cast a spell upon to the majority of the American people that now we're all entrapped by. So as you listen to this individual, and I'm not gonna intercede until he gets through, but as you listen to this individual, remember the words that I said, that if we continue on the path that we're on, the doomsday clock is ticking. It's a minute and a half from hitting straight up and down on the 12 o'clock hour. And when this occurs, when God gets his fill of all this, he will bring retribution upon society such as society has never experienced before. Please listen.
In the United States, New Jersey has the best use of force policies in the United States. Over 350 cities since last June have restricted the power of the police to use force. About 15 states have also done that. So that stuff is big. But we think about one of the biggest leverage, Chuck, is actually police unions. You know, we lead the country's work around police unions, and police unions have an incredible amount of power. There are places where the police, they can't be interviewed within 48 hours. In Portland and in Seattle, the contract says that the officer has to be disciplined in the least embarrassing manner. You're like, I don't even know what that means. There are a lot of places where police disciplinary records get destroyed after 2, 3, 4 years. You know, it's like the police have really rigged this, and there are 20 states that have state-level officer bill of rights that protect the police. That's actually what made the Maryland bill so incredible. Maryland was the first state to have an officer bill of rights and was actually the first state to repeal it.
You know, it's interesting you bring up police unions, because I guess the question is, how much of this reform do you believe has to be on the state and local level? Or are you playing whack-a-mole on the state and local level and nothing happens unless you create a higher floor on the federal level? So I guess, because look, you hear the news that the Justice Department's investigating Minneapolis. And if my first question was, well, what about Brooklyn Center, which is next door? You know, where do you view as where it's needed most? You got to work on the state level because of all these specific laws, or do you think a federal reform package can do the trick?
Do you know what's the highest number of investigations the DOJ has ever done in a given year? Like, what's your guess? There are 18,000 police departments. What's your guess?
Yeah, I'm going to guess less than 5.
3. Yes, you're right. Yeah. So, you know, we like the DOJ intervention. It has changed a lot of places. But when you think about 3 out of 18,000, you're like, that's not a... Right. It's not necessarily a big win, and normally it goes where the media goes. It doesn't necessarily go where the problem's most acute. So you think about places like Phoenix, and Phoenix, 1 in 3 homicides a couple years ago was committed by a police officer, right? Like Albuquerque, you know, it's places like that where the DOJ should actually be intervening, right? Phoenix and Albuquerque.
But our cameras haven't been there. What you're saying is our cameras aren't there, right?
Right, your cameras aren't there. And, you know, the police actually kill more people in suburban communities than almost all other communities combined. It's not even close. So you look at when we graph it, it's like suburbs are here, Cities are here. Cities are actually like the only place that it's getting better. So Brooklyn Center is much more representative of the problem. Ferguson is the suburbs. Kenosha, where Jacob Blake got shot, is the suburbs, right? So I say all that to say the federal government can do some interesting things, but the real juice is at the local and state level. And what Biden could do tomorrow, and the George Floyd Act, remember, doesn't reign in the federal government. He tomorrow could reign in Border Patrol. That's 20,000 officers. ICE, the ATF, the DEA, he has the absolute power to do that without Congress, without a commission, without a task force. He could do that right now.
But you bring up the point I was trying to bring up with Chief Acevedo, and that's because I know the area well. I grew up there. Miami-Dade County has dozens of police forces, right? I promise you, Metro and the city of Miami have a lot of eyes on it. I don't know how many eyes are on Miami Gardens. I don't know how many eyes are on South Miami. And those are just two police departments I'm singling out. And no, I'm not saying there's a specific reason, but that's my point. This suburban police department issue, are there too many of them? Should they all be collapsed?
So definitely too many, but also like people just aren't paying attention. You know, people talk about training and people talk about body cameras. And the research is clear. Training might change police officer attitudes, doesn't change their behaviors. Body cameras might change police officer attitudes, doesn't change their behaviors. Chuck, imagine if you had a job where you could do whatever you wanted, and the worst thing you did, the consequence would be going to a training. You do whatever you wanted. Even with convictions, the highest number of convictions ever. You know, police kill on average 1,100 people a year. The highest number of convictions ever is 11 in a given year.
All right.
Ever. I mean, that
Peter McKesson, I don't mean to cut you off here, but I got to cut you off. The president is about to speak. Really appreciate having you on, discussing this from your point of view as well. So thank you for that. And as I said, here's President Biden on vaccinations.
58 days.
The president is working immensely on trying to eradicate this deadly disease. He needs to be applauded for his determination in trying to turn his country around in that area. There's other areas that we must work on if we're going to make a perfect union become perfect, even as God is crying out, not just to the American race, but to all races upon to the planet. Good luck to all of us, and God bless. Shalom, and God bless America.